In Brazil, Lula da Silva's government prevented the return of Jair Bolsonaro's ministerial model. Parliament waited until the last day to vote on the presidential decree that reconfigured the government structure. The details in the following report by Andre Vieira and Sebastian Soto.
President Lula da Silva won his most important victory in Congress on Thursday, since he took office exactly 6 months ago. The Senate approved by 51-19 to maintain the model of ministries created by the president by means of a provisional measure that will lose its validity on June 1st.
It is important that the government can do it the way it was done, without increasing costs, without creating new quotas. It is in fact an administrative reorganization that goes in accordance with our commitments to the Brazilian people.
The tight time for the vote was triggered by the Chamber of Deputies. The House of Deputies, mostly made up of right-wingers, was the only legislative house to blackmail the government to free out money for parliamentary amendments. The Legislative House only approved on Wednesday by 337 to 125 votes to maintain the current ministerial structure after the release of $340 million by the National Executive for actions of the congressmen in their bases. For the deputy leader of the government in the Chamber of Deputies, the approval of the provisional measure guarantees the implementation on the policies elected with President Lula.
There are important ministries like the Ministry of Agrarian Development, for example, which was extinguished by Bolsonaro. We came back and created the Ministry of Indigenous People. We strengthened the Ministry of Environment. We practically recreated the Ministry of Labor and Employment, which are fundamental ministries. The Ministry of Women, the Ministry to Combat Racism. So I believe that President Lula is fulfilling his government agenda and his commitments. I think it was a spectacular victory.
The current 37 ministries are maintained, but the Chamber of Deputies edited the provisional measure that reconfigured them and at the same time made important sector fragile. For example, it removed the National Water Resources Policy from the Ministry of Environment and the demarcation of indigenous lands from the unprecedented Ministry of Indigenous People, while reviewing the attribution of other ministries. The popular movement stressed the importance of maintaining the current government structure, but questioned the attitude of the Congress, which until last year received public money without transparency, a secret budget in exchange for support for the government of former President Jair Bolsonaro.
It is important because it will allow the government to start working, but we are very concerned about the emptying of some ministry and the attempt to shape mainly the policies that are fundamental for the working people, such as the agrarian reform, the indigenous issues. Today we are facing the issue of the temporary measure that reorganized the program, My House, My Life, and that there were many problems that have now been highlighted, resolved with amendments, but there is a permanent tension because the National Congress is still not working. It is not favorable to the government, favorable for the needs of the Brazilian people to have access to land, to food, to work, to housing.
Lula's government ends today strengthened, but will have to dialogue until 2026, the last year of his administration, with the most conservative Congress since the end of the civil-military dictatorship in 1985.
Andre Vieira e Sebastian Soto, TeleSUR, Brasil.